Hey everyone, welcome back to the garage. Well, today we are making some more progress on the diesel swap here. Last time we got the engine pretty much fully mounted. We got the front and rear mounts done. We're at the moment working on a transmission mount. We got the radiator mounted and installed, more or less roughly where it's going to go. It kind of is hard to see a little bit, but we have solved most of our clearance problems. Haven't tackled the water neck down there yet out of the radiator. I've got an idea to solve that. I think I mentioned in a previous video, but we're going to focus on getting the motor running, and then we'll go from there. But as you can probably tell, got the good wiring. We have been doing some testing out here, just kind of seeing how some of the wiring's been doing. Still about, I'd say probably about an hour or two's worth of work away from being able to actually potentially turn this over if I had good batteries in it. But I am able to at least power the truck up for the most part and start to see if like my dash and everything comes to life. I have yet to wire the shutdown solenoid pull in and the ground. I have the wires ran up to the plug here, but I have to run them from the plug back. The ground just has to come over to here to a ground, and then I've got to mount my fuse and run my pull-in wire for the shutdown solenoid over to the starter solenoid over here. I've got to mount my fuse. And I was initially not going to fuse the pull-in side. The hold-in side has already a fuse built into it from the factory, but I decided I should probably put a fuse on the pull-in side just because of the nature of how it's running and the potential carrying capacity of the wire, that just in case something happens, I figure better safe than sorry to put a fuse in there. For those of you that are wondering, this is a Dodge shutdown solenoid that I got for this, and I made a custom mount for it and then set my pump up to work with it. And basically all it does, if I can reach in there and do it without blocking the camera, basically it's just going to pull the lever in when the truck is started, and it does that with 3 wires. It has a ground that obviously grounds the coil. It has a hold coil that will sit there and hold it pulled back once you turn the key on, but it takes a lot of energy to pull that coil back and to pull the linkage in the rack back. So what they have is a secondary coil in there that is called the pull-in coil. It shares the same ground, but it's an extra coil that works off of your starter solenoid, so that whenever you crank the motor and you go to the start position on the key, it will send voltage to that secondary coil, suck the whole plunger assembly in, and then when you let off the key, the run coil will keep it held back, because once it's pulled back, it only takes a little bit of current for it to hold it. But we're getting that wired up. That's really the last wiring thing I need to do. But I do have power to the dash. I've also in here, I got the shift tower pulled off. I got the transmission filled up with gear lube. It uses 50 weight full synthetic gear lube. The other thing I got was the transmission adapter. We get the light going here. I've reinstalled the transmission adapter and actually one of probably the last times it'll be installed. And I've got the sealant on the back of the shims that space this out, to where hopefully we will be able to not have some leaks. The other thing is, you see I have the yoke and the nut temporarily installed, mainly because I also have a seal in here now, and that yoke has to be present for the seal to actually do its job. The main thing for this was just getting the transmission sealed up so that I could actually have the engine run and not have a dry transmission hooked to it and then potentially burn something up. So the transmission is full of fluid and it's ready to go. The only other thing I've got to do is up over in here on the transmission side, I've just got to tie up the clutch release there. I've just got to pull it up just so that way it's not sitting there slack and potentially running into the flywheel. So, but other than that, we can go ahead and do a little test here. I've got power run to the whole truck. We can see what the dash is going to do here. Now there is some stuff on the dash that is not going to work correctly because I don't have some of the senders working quite yet. As you see, I got a dome light and then the interior lights, so my door switches are working. And if we flip the light switch on over here, I get a door dinger, and I don't know if you can see it or not. You can kind of see it. I get the backlights for my gauges are working. Except I think I have one bulb out down there I got to take care of. But other than that, if I roll the key forward, we have some gauges. It's kind of hard to tell, but the coolant temperature gauge does move down a little bit, so it is connected. Obviously my voltage gauge works. My fuel tanks are not, the plug for the tank selector is unhooked, so it's not going to work right now. And then my oil pressure gauge also obviously is bottomed out because it is not reading any oil pressure. But I've got lights to my radio. I don't have a blower fan. I think I've got a ground unhooked. Ooh, that's annoying. I think I've got a ground unhooked for my relay that works for the blower motor. I think the ground is not hooked up at the moment, which is why it's not working. But if the other thing, if we roll the key forward here and then you listen, we're getting a click, and the click is actually what we want to be hearing. The starter's not hooked up yet, but that click is a really good thing. It's telling us that this solenoid is working and that we have power going through our new fuse system. That's actually something else since the last video. I've got the two correct sized fuses installed for the alternator and the power distribution box. So that is all pretty well buttoned up for the most part. I do have a few other things I need to do, just little stuff, but I'll probably get the truck running first and then go back and do that stuff. The main thing we're trying to do with a lot of this stuff is just get this trying to run, make sure that everything's going to play together as we kind of hope it will, and then I can go back and start to do all the little stuff that comes after that. So at the moment what I'm working on is, you notice there's kind of something that should be kind of here-ish, and there's a hole down there. The dipstick tube is AWOL. It's over here. Had to do some custom modifications to it, and I'm just about done. I'm not quite. I got to weld a few more holes up when I finish it, but what I had to end up doing, and I don't know if I can show you well enough with this, but you see I kind of had to dog leg it. It originally had a very sweeping arc that went out kind of straight, and the original, when I mocked it up, it worked just fine, and it was going to come out kind of about here. Well, that was with the factory pancake style brake booster that set this whole thing back about 2 more inches, and by putting the Hydro Boost on there, it pushed this whole assembly out and now put it right in the way of where my original intent for where the dipstick was going to come out. So I just ended up turning it, and now where it will sit, in theory, is actually a little more convenient, because this is not only a dipstick, this is also where you fill from. It should set it right about there, almost vertical, so you can just put a funnel in here and fill your oil straight from this and not have to try to deal with a funnel on the side. But this is one of the last things. Once I get this finished, I can go ahead and install it and get the motor full of oil, get the filters on it, and then it comes down to just basically wiring, and we could try to crank this thing over, see if it's turning over, if it builds oil pressure correctly, and then if it does that, we can put fuel to it and see if it'll fire. I'll probably start off, get it just cranking over first without any fuel hooked up to it, just see if it's gonna actually turn over correctly. Maybe just give it a little whiff of starting fluid just to see if it'll pop off, and then we'll go to the fuel. But I'll bring it back when I got this finished up and installed, and when we're on to the wiring. Well, after raiding the spaghetti mess down over there, that's all scrap wiring. Well, a couple of things in the box are actual good harnesses still, but most of these are all just parts harnesses and pieces that I've pulled off of other stuff. We should be ready to go here. The starter circuit is still unhooked, so obviously the engine won't turn over, but the pull-in and hold-in coils are all wired in now and appear to be working. So the shutdown mechanism should be good to go. I've went ahead and also attached a couple of the grounds over there and over there as well to get the grounding side of the wiring harness put back together. I still think I'm missing a couple things because I still don't have a blower fan. The other thing I still don't quite have right is I don't have my thermo switch for the electric fans on the radiator, but this is not needed for the moment, so we're just gonna leave it off to the side and I'll wire it in later. You can kind of see I have to mount it still yet, but the fuse right here in this holder is for my pull-in coil, and then the wire runs underneath here to the pull-in wire. I've got my ground wired in here. That runs around over to this point over here. Run back with the harness. And so now, if we watch here, if I can figure out how to get you guys set up here to, let's see if I can, nope, you can't see that. Well, you're gonna have to apologize for the quality of the video, but what you're going to be looking for is back in here, this plunger here, right in here. It should suck back in like that, and it should stay in place once the key is let off. You'll hear a click, and you'll hear the starter solenoid engage, and that should move in at the same time, if we did it all right. So the first thing is I'll roll the key forward, and I get the door dinger. And then if I hit the key to the start position, it was pretty quick. I don't know if you see it, but if I let off on the key, you can see the solenoid flick back to the stop position. If I hit the starter position again, and I can continue to hit the starter if I need to, but it won't obviously do anything with the coil. Let off. So that all appears to be working. That is all with the key, which is really exciting. It's all functioning correctly. The shutdown side of it is functioning correctly, and the default of it appears to be working correctly, which is if it loses power to anything, it just shuts off. That way the motor can't just sit there and run with no power connected. So for the moment, that's all I need to really do for the engine wiring. My alternator's all wired up. You can see I got all my related harnesses hooked up, and I should be good to go there. The last couple things, if I pan over here, I got my dipstick installed, got the oil added to it. It should be almost to the correct level. I'm still going to check it one more time. I've got to put the filters on the oil side, get that set up, and other than that, I think I just need to go and get a couple of batteries. That's going to be like 400 bucks. Yay. Well, you gotta pay to play, as they say, so I gotta do a couple small things yet, and I'll bring you back when we're getting ready to start. Well, it's a little cold in Iowa today, and I am a little bundled up as a result, but we are just about ready to see if it's going to turn over. I don't have any fuel hooked up to it, so it is really, the goal is just to see if it'll spin the motor over. I'm not even sure if it will, just because of how cold it is, and I'm not sure I've got a good enough connection, but I kind of just want to try it and just see if everything seems like it's working okay. I went ahead and got the starter installed. It's not the greatest install. It's in there. I had to trim it a little more just to make it all fit and get it up in there, but it is a really heavy and big starter, and I am going to try and find a gear reduction starter that will help with weight, but more so it'll buy me back that clearance that I mentioned earlier on in the video that or actually it was in the last video, that we had an issue with our differential clearance. But it's in there. Hopefully it works. I don't actually know if it will spin the motor over with 2 charged batteries. I've spun the motor over before, just kind of to see make sure it wasn't locked up, quite frankly. And it spun it over, but it was very slow, but I also didn't have good batteries on it. So I just went and got 2 fresh batteries. We'll see if it works. I don't know. So in the previous clip, we did test the starting circuit and everything else. So in theory, all of the circuitry should be good. And just checking here, I have my gauges more or less working. The oil pressure gauge is a little iffy, but since we're not starting it, I'm not terribly worried about it. Plus, I got to fill those filters anyway, so it might take a little bit. Other than that, the I did go in and address the other thing that I had mentioned with the, let's see, the power steering pump. I needed to go back in and actually, at the moment I just have I filled a line full of oil and looped it, basically just to give myself the presence of oil in the pump so I didn't burn the pump out. It's just going to circulate for the moment just to, again, try to not burn the pump out of it. The pump, other than that though, it should be ready to go. I think the dog's getting a little antsy, wanting to see if it'll start. So we're going to try and just see what it does here. So I flipped the key on and let's see what it does. There we go, we're getting somewhere. Oh, my bungee cord slipped off. The other thing that I had to do was try to get make sure I had the clutch held up. I need a heavier bungee cord. Since the clutch pedal isn't hooked up, I've got to rig up something to try and at least hold the clutch pedal up out of the way so it doesn't contact the flywheel. Get that bungee up out of the way here. Alright, let's see if we got a cranking motor. Getting a little smoke. It might actually try to fire because there was fuel in the system when I unhooked it. So it might actually try to fire. I didn't really plan on it running at all, but if it does try to fire, it appears like it wants to. So I will, seeing as how that's the case, if I have any, give it just a little whiff of some starting fluid just to see if it'll go. I think I gotta go grab some. We'll be right back. Alright, got a little bit of sauce. Now, my opinions on ether, and I know I'm going to get some comments on this. I don't like using ether on engines unless it can be avoided. However, these engines actually came with ether injectors from the factory, and the key to using ether, much like an ether injector, is you don't just sit there and, you know, hold it and spray like 20 seconds worth of ether in there and then crank it and get mad when it blows up. No, you can't do that. You gotta be very sparing and just kind of give it like little of it, and especially if you can, try to do it when it's cranking. Just little spritz here and there, especially when it's cold like this, really isn't going to hurt anything as long as you're careful. Now, if you're not careful, it is very easy to overwhelm an engine with ether, and if you're lucky, it'll just ether lock. If you're not lucky, it may actually do some serious damage to the motor. So we're going to just try to give it just a little snort if needed, just to see if it'll maybe pop off. Other than that, I'm not going to try to do much without fuel hooked up to it. So like I said, this is just to see if it'll turn over consistently and maybe pop off. So we'll go ahead and bring it in here, and I'll just a little whiff just to see if it'll pop off. I should also mention that the throttle is set to an idle position with the springs installed, so it can't run away with the governor. So let's see if she goes. And that was me shutting it off with the key. So I think we can prove this is a success. She does run. That was actually running off of a little bit of diesel too. Like I said, there was some diesel in the line. So it did actually run for a second. I don't want to run it any longer than that though, because I don't have a proper oil pressure gauge hooked up right now. And I don't want to be able to run it for very long without having a way to monitor oil pressure. The gauge did move in the dash, but it currently, with just the key on, it sits almost towards the high side of the gauge. So I don't know that I trust that sender, especially since I have unknown history of how this motor was set up in the previous truck. But for the moment, I call that a success. I wasn't sure if it would actually run in this video. I wasn't sure how some things would go, but yeah, we got a runner. Now we can move on to the rest of it. So thank you all for watching. Appreciate it. Stay tuned as we continue this wonderful menagerie and hopefully continue to work our way towards a running, driving truck. See you later.